What if one of the loudest, brightest sci-fi films of the 90s wasn't born in a studio boardroom, but in the head of a lonely teenager who built a universe to escape into, and then spent decades compressing that universe into 2 hours of neon opera and flying taxis? Here are 21 weird, wonderful truths that explain how The Fifth Element became chaos and couture and a cult classic that still lives rent-free in our heads. Number 1, the movie began as a teenager's secret hideout. Before it was a cult classic, The Fifth Element was essentially a refuge, a universe brainstormed by a 16-year-old kid in rural France who felt boxed in by everything around him. There were no producers to impress, no pitch decks, just notebooks stacked with planets and people that didn't exist yet. That's why the finished film still hums like a diary with a jet engine. You can feel the way the movie treats escape as a sacred act. It doesn't just open a door, it builds a city in the sky and gives you a taxi. The protagonists aren't born with destiny, they accidentally hail it. Even the tonal whiplash, opera, slapstick, apocalypse, reads like a teenager's all-you-can-eat imagination, unashamed of contradiction. What looked like chaos on screen began as coherence in someone's heart. When the world feels too small, write a bigger one and live there until the edges of reality catch up. Number 2, it wasn't a script. It was a galaxy-sized trilogy. The first draft wasn't a standard 120-page screenplay. It was a sprawling manuscript that could have filled 3 movies, minimum. Entire alien species had grammars and rights. Council politics were mapped like a war college simulation. Even background props had backstories. There were timelines within timelines, continents on planets that never appear in the final cut, and histories for characters who would eventually become 2-second extras. When financing entered the chat, practical questions landed hard. Which thread do you keep? Which do you snip? And how do you fold an encyclopedia into a roller coaster? The answer was radical compression. The movie we got is the middle of a much larger tale, a glittering slice cut from a dense narrative loaf. That's why the world feels bigger than the frame. Every crowd shot hints at stories happening one room over. It's less a singular plot than a parade. A shin chamber turning lore into velocity. Number 3. Corbin Dallas was almost cast for grit instead of grin. There's a timeline where the hero is grimmer, older, and more granite-jawed, competent to the point of solemnity. That version of Corbin would have steered the movie toward a colder orbit, all competence and haunted eyes. The Corbin we got is built from shrug and smirk. He's that guy from your block who used to be elite military and now just wants a quiet morning and a decent cigarette. The kind of everyman who treats destiny like a parking ticket he didn't ask for. That tonal choice reroutes the entire film. When your lead knows how to crack a dry joke after a 90-degree plunge through sky traffic, it gives the audience permission to enjoy the wildness instead of bracing against it. The humor isn't a garnish, it's a survival tool. You believe the future is terrifying, but survivable, especially if your cab has airbags and your wit is quick. 4. Gary Oldman said yes as a favor and played confused on purpose. No audition, no pursuit, no puzzle box analysis. Gary Oldman is famously chameleonic, and here he took the gig largely as a friend, doing a friend a solid. He also later admitted the plot's cosmic zigzags weren't exactly crystal clear to him, but that very confusion becomes the character. Zorg is a carnival barker tycoon whose moral compass is a limited edition accessory. He doesn't understand the universe. He intends to sell it parts. The plastic half-helmet, the weaponized southern lilt, the cadence that sounds like a salesman rebooted by a fashion house. None of that requires plot clarity. What it requires is tone, and Oldman nails a tone that dances between cartoon and credible threat. He doesn't twirl a mustache. He itemizes evil like a product demo. The result is a villain you can't pin down. Ridiculous and chilling, a boardroom demon dipped in lacquer. 5. Leelu beat. Out 8,000 people by feeling like tomorrow, not Alien. Casting agents saw thousands of actresses, some famous, some hungry, all trying to sound or move extraterrestrial. But the brief wasn't do a voice. It was feel like a person who hasn't learned to be human yet. When the winner walked in, the room reportedly didn't react to volume or technique. It reacted to presence. There's a particular kind of stillness that reads as otherworldly because it doesn't beg for attention. It quietly warps the air. That stillness, paired with wide-eyed curiosity, became Leelu's engine. She doesn't perform alienness. She experiences everything as if for the first time. That's why even a simple street food scene lands as transcendent. She's not pretending to taste. She's discovering taste. The orange straps, as iconic as they are, merely crowned what casting had already found. A face that seems imported from a place where emotion is light and language is new. 6. The diva on stage was the director's wife off stage during a breakup. The opera sequence is the film's soul stopper, a blue-lit apparition, movement like water, voice like glass under stress. Inside the elaborate prosthetics and costume was the director's spouse, an artist in her own right. While the production built a universe of illusions, a very real relationship was rearranging itself behind the scenes. By the time cameras stopped, the marriage had ended privately, and the director's life had tilted toward the film's lead. The movie never announces this, of course. It simply holds a shot on the diva, as if listening to more than a song. If part of the performance feels haunted, it might be because art and life were sharing a dressing room. 2 women anchor the movie's emotional poles. One, a weaponized innocence, the other, a sacred voice with secrets. Their scenes never intersect, yet they echo, one learning humanity, the other singing through loss. 7. Leelu's divine language is a real constructed tongue with a private history. Those clipped syllables and shining vowels aren't random phonetics. The language was designed with an internal logic, basic grammar, a working vocabulary, and a repeatable sound system. It wasn't just memorized for the camera. It was practiced off-set, traded in notes, and for a period, used like a private cipher between 2 people very publicly making a film. That's why lines you've heard 100 times still feel like they carry secret meaning. Because originally, some of them did. The tongue isn't big enough to write an epic, but it's more than wardrobe noise. Its language is character design, giving Leelu a mind you can hear even when you don't understand. And because it has rules, it allowed playful improvisation. You can sense the delight of a performer who knows not only what to say, but how her character would think the thought. 8. Milla Jovovich trained to take the hits and deliver them. Plenty of action films default to masked doubles and aggressive cutting, which is fine until your hero's face needs to sell the impact. Jovovich put in the ugly hours, wire rigs that chafe, Katas learned until their muscle hiccups. Bruises, you tape and perform over. The corridor dust-up, knees like switchblades, elbows like punctuation, isn't designed around what she can't do. It celebrates what she can. The goal wasn't martial arts authenticity by purist standards. It was storytelling authenticity. Leelu isn't invulnerable. She's new, powerful, and learning in real time. When she misjudges distance by a hair or lands a kick that looks like it hurts both people. 9. Zorg's all-in-one supergun contained a real flamethrower that scared the crew. The Try Me gun is half comedy bit, half consumer nightmare. The prop department built functioning elements to give the gag teeth, including an honest-to-goodness flame system. Testing anything that spits fire in an enclosed space is a fast way to learn who knows where the extinguishers live. One early burst licked the ceiling and instantly turned a set full of cool professionals into a track meet. After safety checks and resets, the production kept its appetite for practical chaos, but with renewed respect for heat. The joke plays because it's grounded in reality, danger clasped inside spectacle. The burning gag isn't just pixels, it's physics with a sense of humor. 10. The Mondo Shawan suits were gorgeous, immovable ovens. They look like sacred beetles built by a cathedral. Smooth, solemn, dignified. Inside, they were 80-pound foam prisons with barely any ventilation. The actors moved like glaciers, not because of style notes, but to keep their core temperatures in the survivable zone. At least one performer overheated and had to be extracted like a pearl from a clam, carefully, quickly, with the kind of teamwork that turns panic into procedure. The footage reads as ceremonial, almost priestly. The day felt like triage. There's a reason the opening sequence radiates reverence. Everyone on set was quietly worshiping oxygen. 11. Ruby Rhod's couture was a rigid spine you can't sit in. Ruby's wardrobe is the loudest thing in a movie that includes literal explosions. It's also a wearable cage, engineered sculpture, not pajamas. The signature look had a built-in rigidity that made sitting physically impossible. Between takes, the performer learned to rest against architecture. Corners, door frames, anything vertical. Sweat was part of the job. Posture became a discipline. Then the camera rolled, and he detonated into motion, fast as static. Voice like a laser pointer on helium. That contrast, immobility off camera, ricochet energy on camera, sells the character's chaos. The costume isn't just decoration. It's a constraint that the performance alchemizes into power, like a sprinter exploding from starting blocks he can't quite bend on. 12. The Diva's concert hall explosion was a one-take practical detonation. Plenty of films build their climaxes on green screens and patch them together in post. Here, the team staged a controlled demolition inside a real structure, rigged to die cinematically one time. Dozens of cameras caught angles you can feel even if you blink at the wrong moment. Squibs and charges went off in a choreography nastier than ballet. There would be no second try, no, let's reset the walls. When the blast arrives, your body reads it as real, because some part of it was. The debris falls with weight. The air seems to shove the actors. That visceral shove is why the scene lingers in your ribs years later. Practical effects earning their union cards with a bang. 13. The hero and villain never share a scene because fate, not fists, is the point. It's one of the film's strangest structural choices. Corbin and Zorg never actually face each other. That's not a scheduling fluke. It's design. The story treats evil and good like weather systems, not duelists. The cab driver's choices send ripples one way. The tycoon's greed sends different ripples the other. Somewhere in the middle, the waves collide. The tension comes from near misses and overlapping consequences, not a ceremonial showdown. You keep waiting for the elevator doors to ding and reveal the other guy. They never do. The absence of a face-to-face becomes a statement. Destiny doesn't always tap you on the shoulder before it rearranges your life. Sometimes just blows past in the hallway. 14. Bright daylight was a rule-breaking flex that exposed every seam. Sci-fi often hides in shadow for good reasons. Shadows are forgiving, night makes rubber look like steel, and moody lighting flatters matte paint. This film throws the skylight open. Sunshine pours over the taxi chase. White corridors glare during shootouts, and chrome announces every fingerprint. It's risky because the camera can't politely blur mistakes. But that risk has a payoff: confidence. The world looks like it believes in itself. You're invited to examine, not squint, and it forces the crafts teams, costume, props, effects, to make things that hold up under scrutiny. The result is an odd kind of honesty. Even when the movie embraces cartoon logic, it does so with documentary lighting. The future isn't just plausible at midnight, it's plausible at noon. 15. Ruby Rhod was nearly played by pop royalty until the wardrobe scared him off. Ruby's DNA is part shock jock, part fashion icon, part intergalactic influencer. Early on, the wish list for casting pointed at a musician whose androgynous glam had already redefined stage presence for a generation. Meetings happened, interest flickered, then costume sketches arrived. Lace, mesh, negative space, geometry that behaved like a dare. The legend reportedly balked. Too much, even for him. Enter a younger comet with bullet speed delivery and a gift for turning helium into charisma. He didn't imitate the almost cast icon. He translated the concept into his own language. Faster, squeakier, somehow sweeter. The performance you know, leopard print, floral mic, shriek, like a siren, feels inevitable now. But on another Earth, an entirely different Ruby is purring into a crystal mic and redefining the word sultry. 16. Booed at Cannes, Blessed by Time, and Teenagers. The movie's premiere on the world's swankiest red carpet wasn't an unbroken victory lap. Some early reactions found it silly, noisy, and suspiciously proud of its own wardrobe. But movies aren't graded on opening night alone. Outside the tuxedo bubble, audiences, especially young ones, adopted it with a fervor usually reserved for bands. They quoted lines badly and loved the sound anyway. They wore orange straps in October and called it a costume. They turned multipass into a password. Over years, the sneer softened into affection, then admiration. Critics revisited the film and found a different object than they remembered, one that didn't ask permission to be maximalist. That fused opera and slapstick without apologizing, that invented a coherent nonsense that felt like life. Time, that notorious editor, did its quiet rewrite. Too much became exactly right. 17. Jean-Paul Gaultier didn't just dress the leads, he dressed the whole galaxy. Costume credits often read like afterthoughts. Here, wardrobe is world building. Over 1,000 garments were designed and made, many for people who zip through frame in 2 seconds. Each alien species received a vocabulary. Silhouettes, textures, materials that hinted at biology and culture. Professions had palettes. Traffic cops dressed like nightclub bouncers from a parallel timeline. Flight attendants looked like they were late to a couture runway. Priests wore geometry cribbed from cathedrals. Even the background extras selling noodles out of floating carts looked like they had unions and off days. That density of design does narrative work. You can mute the dialogue and still follow class, purpose, and allegiance. Fashion isn't a garnish. It's exposition in fiber. The result is a universe that looks worn in and loved. Even when it's ridiculous, it's believable because someone stitched belief into every hem. 18. The Guardians' ships aren't sleek. They're sacred. Most sci-fi craft worship at the altar of aerodynamics. Knives for noses, wings like razors. The Mondo Shawan craft in the prologue feel carved instead of engineered. Rounded crowns, heavy bases, solemn weight. Their shapes whisper of pyramids and temple math, the kind of sacred geometry that predates engines by millennia. That design choice smuggles a thesis into the frame. The future isn't a prison break from the past. It's the past wearing propulsion. Myth bleeds into mechanism. Technology becomes liturgy. When those ships park near an ancient tomb, the scene stops being a cultural collision and becomes a family reunion. The movie folds conspiracy theory kitsch, aliens, and pyramids into an almost religious calm, then opens a textbook on how iconography can make a plastic model feel like a prayer. 19. The skyline you love was built by hand, then taught to fly. Yes, there's digital wizardry, but the bones of those canyons, stacked high-rises with laundry lines of traffic, were miniatures. Resin, foam, paint, painstaking weathering, and tiny bulbs wired like a constellation. Motion control rigs film the models over and over with sub-millimeter precision. Computers then layered in vehicular swarms and light spill. That hybrid approach is why the city feels touchable. Pixels are great at infinity. Hands are better at dirt. When Corbin's taxi dives between towers, you sense the air because something physical was lit, photographed, and given weight. It's future by collage, sculpture under software, craft under code. The marriage gives the skyline a soul you can't quite explain, like an old building that somehow smells like all the dinners it's ever seen. 20. It's a French dream shot in English on British stages with American stars. On paper, it looks like a compromise. French financing, Pinewood soundstages in the UK, a largely British crew, and American leads steering the poster art. In practice, it's a strategy for making a very weird thing legible to the widest possible audience. You don't spend that much on neon chaos and couture and then limit its passport. The film speaks blockbuster while thinking art house. That bilingual identity let it do numbers and whisper secrets. You can shrug like an American, stage like a European, and score like a space cathedral. If cinema is an international language, this production wrote its own dialect, accented by francs, pounds, and dollars, but translating to grins across borders. 21. Multipass wasn't written as a meme. Audiences forged it into one. The catchphrase that launched 1,000 convention lanyards wasn't minted in a marketing meeting. It was simply a character learning a language. Earnest, slightly scrambled, adorable. The humor sits in the gap between intent and articulation. The heart sits in the effort. Audiences grab the word the way kids grab a new slang term, with glee and immediate overuse. Games, shows, and internet culture kept smuggling it in as a secret handshake. It's the perfect emblem for the film itself. One pass that lets you into many rooms. Action, comedy, romance, fashion, and that surprising sliver of spirituality under the sequins. Say it out loud and you're part of a club that doesn't require dues, only delight. That's the neon anatomy of The Fifth Element. A teenager's sanctuary that inflated until it could seat the world. A role almost handed to pop royalty. A galaxy sewn by Gautier. And a throwaway word that became a passport. If this film still rents a neon loft in your head, if you can hear the diva's impossible run, or feel your stomach drop with that sideways taxi, tell me which cult legend to unspool next. We'll pick apart the costumes, trace the near-miss castings, read the pyrotechnics paperwork, and find the human heartbeat under the chrome. Until then, big bada-boom, keep your multipass handy, and remember, some stories are supposed to be too much. That's where the magic is.